What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today I'm back with another installment of 5 things we want in Elder Scrolls 6. You knew this was coming, and remember, you can tune in for the first time at any part of the series you like. Now, I left you hanging a little longer than usual, but I know how much you all love this series, and you know how passionate I am about wanting Elder Scrolls 6 to be a very well executed game. As always, I'm under constant threat of being executed myself, from a variety of dangers, a vast assortment of flavors of doom. Robin Cabay says, Part 8, or I put Meridia's beacon in your closet so you pick it up by accident. I've been trying to declutter my life, so that is honestly terrifying. Part 8, or Bellathor sells everyone's sisters, warns Dan Oliver. And as always, you all seem to be obsessed with the Nazim meme, with 383 thumbs up at the time of writing on the comment, Part 8, or you won't get to the Cloud District very often. I'd say the username, but I could get dinged by YouTube's AI and get demonetized. William Wollstonecroft also said, make Part 8 or all NPCs in Elder Scrolls 6 will be replaced with Nazims. I can't tell if you genuinely love the Nazim meme that much, or if you're just promoting it because I'm so sick of it. Either way, it gets you your Part 8, doesn't it? Wow, thanks mate threatened, make Part 8 or Grelod the Kind will raise your children, and Hayden Foreman went as far as saying the Black Door will forget the password if I don't make Part 8. I'm pretty sure I can't use my email to reset the thing either. Now, one truly terrifying threat, perhaps the worst of them all, comes from Megan Carter, who said, Part 8, or the only platform Elder Scrolls 6 will be available on, will be the Amazon Alexa. Have fun conquering Tamriel with Jeremy Soul's rendition of Despacito playing in the background. And finally, we have an attempt to scare me by Friendship is Magic. Very sweet username, by the way. They said, Part 8, or all the bunnies you slaughtered will be resurrected by Manamako and want their revenge. Now, joke's on you, because I feel too mean to kill the bunnies in my playthrough, and I always want my bunnies slaughtered metric to say 0. But without further ado, let's kick things off with some sensational desires that would make Elder Scrolls 6 a much better game. The first desire is nothing too crazy, but it would definitely be a wonderful addition to a new Elder Scrolls title. This desire is for more focus on staffs, making them more viable in a playstyle and more unique. In Skyrim, there were some cool staff designs aesthetically, and there were some unique ones effect-wise too. However, the majority of them were simply staffs that had an already existing spell effect applied on them. So it would be like, here's a staff that casts the Adept Fire Destruction spell, and that's it. Sure, it didn't cost you magicka, and it instead ran off charge needing soul gems like an enchanted weapon, but generally, if you were a magic character, you were better off using your own magicka instead. Maybe you'd carry a staff in your inventory in case you ran out of magicka, or to cast something like paralysis if you weren't an alteration-based mage in your playthrough, but they just weren't that useful. Simply put, how many playthroughs of Skyrim have you done without mods where you use staves as your main weaponry? As a percentage of total playthroughs, probably not many, and many people have never bothered doing one at all. Sure, the Dragonborn DLC added the staff enchanter in Tel Mithryn, but it still just let you create the same staves based on the spells which already exist. What I want is a system where we can create staves that are actually potent, sometimes more so than certain spells, unique in terms of their effect, and also let's have perks to affect staves. This helps to make a playstyle with staves to be unique, and not just another way of casting a spell that you could cast with magicka anyway, but using soul gem energy instead. We can look at the Ordinator perk overhaul mod for Skyrim for some inspiration. What they did here, which I recommend for Elder Scrolls 6, is add some perks branching off inside the enchanting skill tree that involves staves. So there was the Staff Channeler perk, which made weapon enchantments drain 25% less when you have a staff equipped, which actually incentivizes cool enchanting based characters who may fight with a staff in one hand and an enchanted sword in the other. You could have a character shooting off spells constantly who never actually invests in his or her magicka pool. Another Ordinator perk which built on this was Secret Keeper. This perk meant that when you had a staff held in your left hand, your attacks dealt 25% more damage and crit damage, but if you put this staff in your right hand, your spells and scrolls would be 25% more effective. So you could have a character with a staff in the left hand and an axe in the right, or a character with a staff in the right and a spell in the left, and both would benefit from this perk. Again, same concept with the Flame of Magnus perk in the Ordinator overhaul. While casting or concentrating on a staff in your left hand, you may attack with your right hand, dealing 50% more damage and critical damage. There was also the Staff Recharge perk, which actually meant your staves, while equipped, regenerated 5 points of charge per second, up to their charge level when you last equipped them or recharged them with a soul gem. 2 more ordinator perks to quickly mention just to show you some inspiration for what they could do. There was Heart of the Sun, which could be used to change up the playstyle. You see, it let you use an equipped staff as an energy source, causing it to lose charge at a rate of 15 points per second, but then it made your weapon enchantments 1% more effective per 50 points of charge remaining in the staff. Finally, there's the perk, You Shall Not Pass. This let you create a flash of light that staggers enemies and deals damage equal to half your enchanting skill level. The way you did it was to simultaneously use an enchanted staff in your left hand at the same time as striking with an enchanted weapon in your right hand. As you can tell, most of these perks incentivize using a staff and a weapon, or a staff and a spell, and I'd want perks like this in Elder Scrolls 6, but even perks to just improve staff potency in general, or to benefit players wanting to dual wield staffs. You get the idea. But that's not all. Let's make sure there are some cool effect combos that you can only find on staffs. For example, in Oblivion, there was the staff called Apotheosis, which did 33 damage of Fire, Shock, and Frost for a total of 99 points of elemental damage. Perhaps it would be beneficial to be able to craft your own staff in the same way we want there to be custom spell making. Cool effect combos like having a staff that causes fear in targets and sets them on fire, or having a staff that slows targets and also silences them, preventing them from using magic. That would be sensational. The trade-off is, the more powerful a staff would be, the faster it would drain. Or maybe there's a staff you can buy which does a ridiculously huge area effect of ice damage, like the Ice Storm spell in Skyrim, but 5 times bigger, except that it only does 15 points of damage and is most useful against hordes. You could fly it across the fields from the front line of a war to wear down large clusters of enemy troops, but it would be useless or just not very useful in a single enemy boss battle. So in one neat sentence, have more types of staffs, have perks for them, more unique effects for them, and maybe custom staff making, all causing incentive for using staffs in various playstyles. And now for desire number 2, another quite simple but neat enhancement to the Elder Scrolls series. In Elder Scrolls 6, we would like romance to be vastly improved. In Skyrim, romance was more or less just marriage, which was as simple as popping a necklace on a companion or someone you've helped for a quest, and then you propose and it's happily ever after. In real life, marriage comes from strong romantic connections, and it's usually not too easy to get. In Elder Scrolls 6, let's slow things down and make marriage, or even just a romance option without marriage, a lot deeper. The motto I suggest when doing this is quality over quantity. There's a lot of romanceable options in Skyrim, but it's a very bland process, as I explained. Games like Mass Effect and Knights of the Old Republic did romance much better, with more fleshed out characters who are actually of value to you. So this is what we do with companions too, like what Fallout 4 did, having less companions than Skyrim, but each one was an actual character, someone with a personality, varying beliefs, and a life story. There are a few better done examples of companions in Skyrim, such as Serana, but they're rare and not overly developed too. So in Elder Scrolls 6, I want a longer build-up for opportunities for you to interact with your companions in a way that promotes the romance and chemistry. I would like it executed better than just a flirt dialogue option like in Fallout 4. I remember with Scott at the end of his Fallout 4 playthrough, he pretty much just went around to all of his companions and pressed Y to romance and just rooted them all. It just feels a bit silly. So instead of doing something along the lines of just adding in options with flirt written next to them, I think it would feel more natural if you actually just picked from a variety of speech options and you had to think about which ones felt the most caring, romantic, flirty, or playful. Kind of like how with Serana in Skyrim, she could express feelings for you if you chose all the correct speech options. We don't have to make it super difficult, like you have to press every single correct option or you screw it up, but you should still consistently show intent and have to use dialogue that promotes intimacy in some sort of way. And your speech options should have consequences too. So if you're extremely rude to a companion consistently, you won't be able to romance them. And it doesn't matter if you've got speech 100, you won't be able to marry someone who you've been super were rude to or done mean things to. Companions should have inbuilt preferences too, character traits that define what they're attracted to. For example, there might be a companion who hates orcs, so if you're playing an orc, you won't be able to romance them no matter what, as they always stay true to themselves and they just stubbornly won't bend for the player. There might even be a bandit companion, a female who only likes bad boys and will only feel attracted to you if you have high levels of infamy. Certain faction allegiances might be needed for some romances too. Now this is cool because for role-playing, you might actually be swayed into making playthrough decisions due to the feelings of someone you have strong feelings for. Your choices are shaped by them as you would actually have an emotional attachment to them. Some characters might not like you dealing with Daedra. Some might have a thing for magic users, so it's easier to romance them if you're a mage, but still not impossible if you're a warrior. I do like special character quests too that may have to be completed in order for romance to flourish. Overall, this makes the payout at the end, be it marriage or just a super strong romantic bond, actually meaningful. But not only will your romanceable companions be able to sway you, you might be able to sway them through your dialogue and actions. For example, imagine some celibate priest companion who has made vows to have no sexual relations in life whatsoever. However, slowly you're able to flirt with him, manipulate him, and gradually break down his values, causing him to forsake them for a lusty romance with you. The whole point here is that meaningful interaction is what makes companions and romance really good. Perhaps you can even give gifts to show your romantic intention, although that's just a small point to consider, and by no means do I want you to just be able to pick a girl flowers and have her fall in love with you on the spot. Also, a final point to draw from, again in Fallout 4, is the whole on-screen message thing that says, they liked that, or they disliked that. It's definitely not bad, but it's a little robotic. I think it would be better if you heard through dialogue, so you could just tell from what companions said, or the tone they said things in, whether or not they liked your decision. Make it a little bit more intuitive, more organic. In a nutshell, romance should be more realistic, with more depth, constantly hammering quality over quantity. Something that truly helps make any Elder Scrolls game memorable is extremely fun and unique boss battle encounters. Having more unique bosses to battle in Elder Scrolls 6 is our third desire on this list, and I think it's something everyone will agree on. The first thing I will say before I explain this desire is that Skyrim definitely didn't do boss battles bad. In fact, there's plenty of awe-inspiring bosses to fight in Skyrim and all the previous Elder Scrolls titles. In Elder Scrolls 6 we want to see these continue, but with greater quantity and variety of boss types and environments that the battles take place in. When I think of boss battles in Skyrim, there's the battle with Mercer Frey as he tries to steal the Eye of the Falmer. There's the duel against Ancano as he tries to activate the Eye of Magnus. There's Orchendor, the teleporting mage who you battle in Periat's quest. There's the face-off against Harkin. There's the Ebony Warrior. There's so many good boss battles to commend Skyrim for. However, the critique I will give is that a lot, and I mean a lot of boss battles, were dragons, most of which were just random and annoying, but even the named dragons or set piece ones weren't that interesting. The first dragon you kill is a massive thrill, and then it slowly wears off. Obviously, the dragon in Blackreach is an example of a good, unique dragon encounter, and I definitely loved the two dragons that smashed out from the ice in the Forgotten Vale during the Dawnguard DLC. Anyways, it was not only all the repetitive dragon battles that got boring, but sometimes dragon priests too. Dragon priests made for some really epic boss battles, but they definitely took up a lot of potential for other cooler, perhaps more unique bosses to fight. Including all DLC, there's 12 dragon priests you can encounter, 13 if you include Mirak, who is definitely a standout unique one, and yes, most of the dragon priests are cool, but imagine if a whole bunch of them were replaced with truly unique bosses. So think of what could have been possible in the Dragonborn DLC on Solstheim. During the quest, The Final Descent, where you travel deep into Bloodskull Barrow, you find a unique sword called the Bloodskull Blade. This unique red sword, which can shoot out red beams of energy that deal ranged damage, is simply lying next to the remains of Gratian Corellius. You then use its projectiles to open a door, which leads you to a dragon priest named Zakrisos. This was still really neat, and it's good that they changed the priest mask design in the DLC, but I think Zakrisos himself isn't too memorable. It would have been cooler if you were to make your way down into the barrow and you come face to face with a truly unique boss. Sitting on a throne is a raggedy being. Bits of black cloth are draped draped around the figure, who rises to face you the moment you enter the room. This opponent looks like nothing you've ever faced before, and seems to have 50% faster movement speed too. Instantly, he unsheaths his sword, a giant crimson blade, as beautiful as it is deadly. This is the Bloodscar blade, and before you obtain it, you're going to have to fight this enemy for it. What's even cooler is that you're completely taken by surprise as your foe's first attack is a sideways power attack from across the room, releasing a surge of red energy which travels rapidly towards you, forcing you to take cover as the true power of this sword is revealed for the first time. This enemy would be some kind of lich, a necromancer who used a kind of ancient Nordic necromancy ritual lost to the ages. The lich would appear very human actually, with parts of his skin still intact. Visually it would look like a frail old man with normal parts of flesh and skin like any elderly person would have, but other parts showing bone where no skin or organs are present, such as over parts of the ribcage. His eyes would glow bright red, the same color of energy within the sword. His appearance of a decaying man would contrast greatly with his rapid movement speed and strength with the unique blade. Overall, this depiction of unique boss I came up with is a perfect example of how I want boss battles to be done in Elder Scrolls 6. This would be so much better and more memorable than just another dragon priest. Truly unique bosses and boss battles are cool because they provide more enemy variety, they make seemingly normal quests feel very special, and even more ordinary locations are made unforgettable. It can provide situations for the bosses to interact uniquely with their environment, such as those dragons erupting from the ice, as I mentioned earlier, and it also provides better opportunities for more unique items to be shown off in a flashy way. On top of this, you could even argue it gives more incentive to create unique weapons and armor to help make the bosses even cooler. Many of these weapons, like the Bloodscar blade, change the way you play too. Think of the battle with Mirak and obtaining his unique staff afterwards. That's a solid example of a boss battle done well. However, it is the climax of the Dragonborn DLC. Battles that are just as unique against bosses who are just as unique should feature throughout the entire game. Obviously, I don't expect them to be as grand in scale. I don't expect everything to be an Apocrypha Spire battle, of course. All these bosses, some of which would have a unique playstyle they use against you, not only help to keep your playthrough fresh, but it also helps you feel more accomplished, compared to just killing another dragon or killing another dragon priest with the same strategy you tend to use against all of them. You'd feel like a beast being surprised by a foe like the Lich I mentioned, only to overcome him by thinking fast and adapting to the situation. You could easily imagine a foe like the one I described, thrown into an old crypt deep below the sands of Hammerfell in Elder Scrolls 6, an undead Yakuden wielding a mythical scimitar, powered by an ancient force someone desperately wanted to lock away. Our fourth desire on this list comes punching its way in drunk and disorderly, and it is for the unarmed or hand-to-hand combat system to be fleshed out and improved. In Oblivion, for example, unarmed combat was its own skill called hand-to-hand, and like the other combat skills, you unlocked new moves to use as your skill hit certain levels. So you could use a sideways power attack to attempt a disarm, a backwards one to attempt a knockdown, and a forwards one for a paralyze. You also attacked with alternating strikes by pressing the right trigger or left click, and then the left trigger or right click was to block, a feature removed in Skyrim. In Skyrim, you were good at unarmed at low levels if you chose to play as a Khajiit or Argonian, but as you leveled up, you needed to follow certain methods if you wanted hand-to-hand to actually be viable. It wasn't an actual skill, so you wouldn't level up by using it anyway. You had to specialize into heavy armor and get the perk called Fists of Steel, which made you deal damage in the form of your gauntlet armor rating. You could then use enchanting to buff this up further. A problem here is that a lot of the coolest hand-to-hand builds would be monk-like characters, usually lighter builds, not clad in massive sets of heavy armor, and definitely not always enchanters. However, I definitely understand why the focus on hand-to-hand was reduced. Being able to just kill people in breastplates with bare fist punches in Oblivion was a little bit silly, or spinning around and striking someone with your hand, causing them to fly through the air. It was a little bit too anime, but I don't think that's cause enough to remove the skill entirely. Another cool attack was the unarmed sneak attack, which became a pressure point jab with your fingers. Very cool for role-playing some sort of hand-to-hand specialist assassin. So in Elder Scrolls 6, I just want to see hand-to-hand combat given some more love. The reason I'd call it hand-to-hand and not unarmed is that there may be hand-to-hand weapons available for use, and I'm not a fan of the contradictory term unarmed weaponry. Things like knuckle dusters or knuckle blades could fit in really well, especially in a place like Hammerfell where more exotic weapons weapons might be more prevalent. Other hand-to-hand weapons that could be included are basic claw-like weapons, like those originating from the Indian subcontinent. You could have some variants of push daggers, things like katars, and maybe even some crescent knife-type weapons. Just keep in mind we want it to be tasteful, not some drastically overdone Final Fantasy-looking stuff. The design would have to look appropriate for the Elder Scrolls world, and yes, it could look somewhat fantastical, but please don't make it miles and miles beyond realistic. Of course, there's always opportunity for some really crazy stuff, such as some ancient magical hand-to-hand artifact, but this would be the exception, not the rule. Now, not only would these hand-to-hand weapons be not too over the top, we'd also want them not to be that common. They would never compete in open-scale warfare when compared to weapons like swords, spears, hammers, and so on. They just aren't going to be preferred, so most soldiers won't have them, and most bandits won't have them either. Why risk getting close with knuckle dusters or a push dagger when you can increase your reach dramatically with a steel sword? I'd want hand-to-hand weapons to be a rarer sight, just like how they were in the real world, perhaps employed by certain thugs or criminals, chosen by assassins due to their easily concealable nature, or utilized by highly specialized groups of martial arts practitioners, maybe even used by some warriors as their backup weapon. We want Elder Scrolls 6 to have a lot of weapon variety, but I'd even prioritize extra weapons like spears, flails, halberds, and all that before hand-to-hand weaponry. So let's have hand-to-hand weapons in addition to a larger range of available weapons in general. Otherwise, imagine there's all the same things from Skyrim, like swords, axes, daggers, and then there's just a bunch of hand-to-hand weapons. It would feel weird, like there's way too much attention being placed on gear that should be rather niche. So how would we implement hand-to-hand as an actual skill or combat method in Elder Scrolls 6? Well, there's many ways to skin the Khajiit here. I would still be happy if hand-to-hand perks were simply added into another skill tree like they were in the Ordinator perk overhaul, but having hand-to-hand come back as its own skill would also be sensational. This skill would encompass fighting with your bare hands or claws, or the hand-to-hand weapons I mentioned. Hand-to-hand may even include some kicks in the form of unique power attacks and so on. So as a skill, it would level up as you use it, just like any other skill. Then within the skill tree, you simply have perks, which allow you to specialize in different types of fighting. There could be 3 different trees which focus on different martial arts styles or fighting preferences. If Elder Scrolls 6 was set in elsewhere, then having different martial arts you can learn at a martial arts guild would work really well. However, based on the trailer, we're going to assume it's set in either Hammerfell, High Rock, or both. Still, you could easily have a hand-to-hand martial artist faction, and honestly, I see it working better in Hammerfell than in High Rock. Now, with this skill, you'd have your basic perks to improve damage, and hopefully the game takes the same route as the Ordinator overhaul, where your base effectiveness is achieved with 2 perk points instead of 5, and then it goes deeper into more specific perks from there. You could continue with a branch of neutral perks that any hand-to-hand fighter would benefit from, but then split into 2 or 3 specific paths. To keep this desire from overflowing, let's just talk about 2 specific branches you could have. You could have one that specializes in completely bare fist or bare claw fighting. This would be a true unarmed way of fighting, and because unarmed simply can't compete damage-wise with swords and warhammers, or even hand-to-hand weapons, there needs to be something about it to make it strategically different. Perhaps there's knockouts as a part of it, which fit perfectly with anyone wanting to play a pacifist character. There could be perks to make it so that stealth attacks with it deal more crit damage as you focus on pressure points using your fingers, and maybe there are disarm abilities achieved by well-timed blocks, which could also play a large role in the playstyle here. Perks could also make your strikes lower enemy stamina, and perhaps even stagger them more, as the fighting style could emulate unbalancing your opponents with blocks or certain push-based strikes, such as kicks. This fighting style would work great for stealth, but in pure stand-up, it could also focus a lot on speed, making up for the low damage per strike. Standard gauntlets could also enhance your damage here, but they would make you slightly slower than if you went completely bare. As always, races with claws should do more damage here. Another perk branch might involve a heavier warrior focus, where you opt to use sturdier and chunkier hand-to-hand weapons, like the crescent blades. There could be perks here to increase bleeding damage, to have high crit damage, sprinting power attacks, and of course devastating dual flurries like those done with daggers in Skyrim. While you'd still attack at a good speed compared to other weaponry because it's still hand-to-hand, the weight of the weapons would make you slower than if you just used pure unarmed, but obviously you make up for it with more damage. Perhaps this style also allows you to parry enemy strikes with well-timed blocks, taking way less damage than a standard block, however disarms and and knockouts aren't part of the playstyle here with this perk tree branch. Obviously you get slightly more range with hand-to-hand weaponry, but still not as much as swords and the like. Perks in each style would hopefully change the animation and possibly add extra effects to your power attacks. So in summary, whichever way Bethesda decides to do it, let's make hand-to-hand more viable in Elder Scrolls 6, and not just a way to win some money in a bar brawl. A key here, however, is remembering not to make it too anime or to make it feel too bloated in weapon options in proportion to the rest of weapon variety in the game. The fifth and final desire in this video is for a much better magic guild in Elder Scrolls 6. Yes, in this series I've talked about how factions and guilds in general need to be improved, and we've talked about how magic itself could be expanded drastically. However, in the same way I dedicated an entire desire to a better Thieves Guild, I'm now going to talk about how we need a much better magic guild. The point will focus on a magic faction under the presumption that there's only one magic-based guild in the game. However, if you keep up with our series, you'd know I would prefer at least two options for magic users, both with differing philosophies and ideologies. It sucks that my evil mage is forced into conducting himself like a goody two-shoes just because the only mage guild in the game makes him act that way. It would be much better if things were how they were in, say, Morrowind, where you could join the Mages Guild or the Telvanni, both with vastly differing views and beliefs. Anyways, regardless of if there's options or not, for now we can simply just pose the question: what would make a magic guild good in Elder Scrolls 6? Well, similarly to how the Thieves Guild should have revolved more around being a thief and less of delving through dungeons, a magic guild should focus a lot more on making you feel like a student of magic. Sure, you may just join a guild for resources, but for most of the time you're there to learn the secrets of magic, to advance your knowledge and to further your skills as a mage. I've made a pretty big video about all the problems with the College of Winterhold, and there are a lot, but the main one is that you aren't really made to feel like a mage in the guild. So in Elder Scrolls 6, I want the magic faction to actually make me feel like a mage, studying in an arcane place of learning. I don't want to feel like a lackey for some reclusive fringe guild. A great example of this done right was in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Here you had a mages guild in every city, and each one had characters there who were all invested and interested in learning magic. You were then given quests that tended to involve the understanding of certain magical schools. You had to go and complete the quests for each guild in order to win their approval in the form of a recommendation, and once you had all the recommendations, you could finally enter the Arcane University in the Imperial City, and things were only just getting started then. One example of a recommendation quest focusing on magical learning would be the one in Cheydinhal. Here you are asked to find a lost ring, and you must delve into the water beneath a well. You're actually taught a buoyancy spell in order to do so, and this gives you an early insight into the School of Alteration. And while it is a simple quest, it encourages you to use a spell that grants water breathing and makes you lighter with the feather effect in order to complete it. In terms of deeper characterization, you also head to the head mage's room to search for your recommendation, but you find evidence of necromancy instead in the form of black soul gems, which in the setting of Oblivion is very controversial. Now this is a great little piece of foreshadowing for what is to come later, involving the Order of the Black Worm. I can remember the Breville recommendation introduced you to scrolls and the charm spell, and in Bruma you're taught a more efficient version of the open easy lock spell, and use it in conjunction with theft. Anyways, this was all simple stuff, but it encourages an atmosphere of learning. The College of Winterhold did not really do this, and I think looking at what makes a magic faction bad will help to understand what makes one good. So in Skyrim, you're more of a lackey who, outside of using a ward in one magic lesson and using flames on a wall in an excavation site, doesn't really need to use or learn magic that much. The storyline may revolve around magical things, but it more or less feels like you're hired as a kind of mercenary to help the guild, rather than actually being involved as part of the guild. There's no sense of progression either. You just do some dungeon crawling and help them with tasks until boom, you're now the Archmage. Here's an actual quote from our video called Skyrim: The Problem with the College of Winterhold, which summarizes the questline, which was also a weak point. Cast a spell to get in, block a spell in a lecture, go to a ruin and pick up an amulet, cast a spell at a wall and meet an apparition from the Psijic Order, find a giant glowing orb and talk to a librarian about it, go to a fort to retrieve 3 very needed books that happen to have just been taken, and speak to a sentient aura in the basement about it. Consult the college scholars and go to a Dwemer ruin, where you'll meet a member of a different mage faction who is super suspicious of you, but still cooperates and tells you where the Staff of Magnus is anyway. Get told you're going to succeed no matter what by a Psijic monk, and go to the college where, surprise, the suspicious Thalmor member has betrayed you to gain power from from the artifact you found at the start. Go get the staff from the Labyrinthian, which I must say was a very cool place, and then go kill Encarno, get promoted to Archmage, and watch the Psijic Order congratulate you for something they knew would happen, and then take the eye due to reasons they also seemed to know would happen. So I'd like the storyline to be written better too, for sure. There's also only like 3 students in the college and a whole load of instructors, which made it quite weird. I know it's not meant to be Hogwarts, and I don't want some generic Hogwarts experience in Elder Scrolls 6, but there should be more students than teachers, and just more students altogether, even if they were just added as NPCs called students, who walked around doing various magical learning tasks. Even if you couldn't talk to them, it would make any magic faction feel more alive. Now this actually does let Bethesda add more NPCs while still being able to focus actual effort on quality, because they can still hone in on the smaller amount of characters you can talk to and flesh them out, making them super deep. Oblivion did this well, with plenty of students and teachers walking around in the grounds of the Arcane University. Another thing done well here was the sense of progression that was not present in Skyrim. In Oblivion, once you finally join the Arcane University, it is only then you graduate from associate to apprentice and receive your apprentice robes. Soon you get to help make your own custom designed mage staff, which again is just another cool addition that makes you feel like a true practicing mage. You then do the storyline moving up ranks to journeyman, then evoker, conjurer, magician, warlock, wizard, master wizard, and then archmage. So in Elder Scrolls 6, I want ranks in the magic faction, so the pacing feels more spaced out and you have a sense of where you stand in the guild at all times. One place where Oblivion fell short, though, same as Skyrim, was that you couldn't really impact the guild by making choices within the questline. To make a magic faction better, give players the option to make changes in it. So in Oblivion, I would have preferred the option to join the Necromancers as a separate faction to oppose the Mages Guild, but even if we are just talking about one guild here, it would have been cool as you worked your way through the ranks if you could actually bring necromancy back and not have it banned. Perhaps one of the higher ups wants this too, and he helps you overthrow the Archmage who does not like necromancy. Now let's talk through a theoretical questline design. So the mage-centric guild in Elder Scrolls 6, be it in Hammerfell or High Rock, needs to take a lot out of Oblivion's book, but then add more depth to the quest branches and the way the guild and story can play out and change. So let's say you join the guild as a novice. At this stage, you're treated like you know nothing, and you're given a vast array of short but diverse quests to complete, similar to how the recommendation quests worked in Oblivion, in the sense that each quest opens you up to a different school of magic and has you meet various faction characters. These quests should not be anything too grand, nor should they be super long. They should be fun but informative. You'd meet the various mentors in the guild during this, each who have their own specializations and philosophies which you pick up through their dialogue. After passing through the hoops of being a novice and gaining a very foundational understanding of magic, you get to become an apprentice. Each rank should also have special faction privileges, by the way, such as access to enchanting rooms or spell-making equipment. Anyways, as an apprentice, you may do one more general quest, which starts to introduce the overarching focus of the storyline. That is the beginnings of whatever conflict or situation there is to overcome. After this, you're then actually told you need to study under a mentor in order to progress in rank. And here's where things get interesting. The next 3 quests would actually all be unique to the mentor you choose. There would be a mentor for each school of magic, and these 3 quests would make up about a fifth of the length of the faction story. This would heavily incentivize replayability in Elder Scrolls 6, but the 3 quests would still tie into the final 5 or 6 that everyone gets to play. However, the mentor you choose will have impact on you. You will choose based on magical philosophy and school of magic. Doing quests with them will expose you to ways of thinking involving magic and also lead you to gain specific bonuses, such as unique spells they teach you and specialized passives which might align with their philosophy. As far as lore goes, if the game is set in Hammerfell, the magic faction will probably be quite a controversial place, as Red Guards are not too fond of magic, especially Eastern magic such as illusion and conjuration. They don't necessarily all hate all magic though, as there have been mages of note in Hammerfell's history. Anyways, an example of a mentor could be an old Redguard man who loves the Redguard warrior culture, but sees destruction magic as an extension of that, believing it to be a display of raw power, and not as manipulative as other magic styles. He could give you a shock destruction spell that does more damage to enemies the more base magicka they have compared to base health, explaining that this special spell is super effective against magic users, playing off their own magical power to act as a conductor which supercharges your damage. The passive you unlock by completing the 3 quests with him might be that all spells you cast on enemies have a 20% chance to cause a stagger, regardless of school type, and this simply stems from his aggressive, forceful approach to spellcasting. The reason I like a passive like this is because it works with all schools, and you'll probably be using multiple schools of magic. The idea definitely with this isn't to force you to specialize and only use one school, but this passive takes a destruction or destructive philosophy and just applies it to your magic use in general. Anyways, after completing your apprenticeship with your mentor, the unique things you did will then tie in neatly with the remaining 50 or 60% of the storyline. In this part, things would become much grander in scale, and hopefully through your actions, the higher ranks you achieve and the philosophies you come to agree with, you get to change the end outcome before finally achieving the final rank, something equivalent to Archmage. There would be an end outcome based on the main plot and challenges to overcome, but having an impact on the culture would be cool too. Perhaps if the game was set in Hammerfell, you could push to cut down heavily on Eastern magic and really try to help the public, creating a better view of magic by doing good deeds and a better image of the guild. It could lead to having healers trained to help the armies of the Forebears and the Crowns, and even destruction mages might show up in trace amounts on the front line. Perhaps the Thalmor are attacking and Redguard leaders see the need to fight fire with fire, enlisting destruction mages and seeking their understanding of how to fight against enemy magic users. These same leaders could use their reputation to help promote a less demonized view of all magic across the province. Again, magic isn't completely demonized, but it's not looked upon that highly. Alternatively, you could toss out the main traditionalists in the guild, promoting the study of Eastern magic and tarnishing the guild's reputation as a result, the payoff being discovery of newer, more potent conjuration and illusion spells. I'm just spitballing ideas here, but you can see what kind of thing I want. Anyways, in a nutshell, make a magic faction that makes you feel like a mage, one that has you involved more in learning, with more in-depth characters, opportunities to explore a variety of magic philosophies, opportunities to specialize a bit, and the ability to actually influence the direction of the guild and the end outcomes. And that wraps up our latest installment of 5 things we want in Elder Scrolls 6. It's crazy we've gotten all the way to part 8 already. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to tell us what will happen if we don't make a part 9. Also be sure to tell us what you want to see in Elder Scrolls 6. I'm talking ideas we haven't covered yet, as well as your thoughts on ideas we have talked about throughout the series. I'm actually writing this on Christmas Day in the morning, although I'm sure it will be released well after that's done. So I hope you all had a Merry Christmas, and here's to an awesome 2019 filled with amazing games and the best content FudgeMuppet can make. Thank you again for enjoying this as much as me. Social media links are in the description. My name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you guys again very soon.